My wife asked for a divorce during our 20th anniversary party, in front of me, our son, our investors, and her lover. My name is Richard Callahan. I'm 51 years old, CEO and founder of Sterling and Rowe Capital, one of the largest private investment firms in Boston. I've spent my life reading markets, managing risks, making decisions worth millions with just a glance at a chart. I believe that with preparation, logic, and discipline, I could control anything, but I never calculated for betrayal. Not like this. The party was held on the 33rd floor of the Sheraton, the same place where Susan and I got married 2 decades ago. I chose it hoping to reignite something between us, but as the evening unfolded, all I could feel was doubt. Everything on the surface looked perfect. Smooth jazz playing, white tablecloths, 10-year-old French wine, imported orchids. The guest list was curated, our closest partners, board members, legal counsel, a few old friends, and of course, Susan's. Susan was stunning, as always. Crimson velvet gown, red wine lips, and a smile that could disarm a room or hide a secret. Brian, our 20-year-old son, stood at the far end of the room, hands in his pockets, observing everything in silence. He takes after me, sharp eyes, calm demeanor, and silence that cuts deeper than words. Kevin was there too, my COO, my best friend since med school, the man I trusted with my company. And as I'd learned months ago, the man Susan had been sleeping with for nearly a year. I knew everything. I had the emails, the bank transfers, GPS logs, even a recovered audio file from a call Susan never thought I'd hear. I didn't lash out. I didn't destroy anything. I waited for the perfect moment. And tonight, Susan gave it to me, a spotlight of her own choosing. She stepped up to the mic, raised her glass, and smiled as the room quieted. "Thank you all for being here," she said, her voice warm and polished. The voice that used to calm me down after a 14-hour day. 20 years of marriage is a journey, and sometimes that journey takes you to places you never expected. I saw Brian take a breath, tense. Susan looked straight at me. Her next words dropped like glass onto marble. "Richard, I want a divorce." Silence. Sharp. Total. I heard the clink of someone's wine glass slipping through their fingers. I saw a few guests shift uncomfortably, and I felt my heart slow, not from shock, but from confirmation. Susan continued, still calm, still cold. "I'm in another relationship now, with someone who truly listens to me, who makes me feel seen." She didn't need to say the name. Everyone's gaze drifted toward Kevin. He stood frozen, face pale, hand clenched around his wine glass. No one in the room doubted what had just been revealed. I didn't scream. I didn't punch a wall. I simply stepped forward, reaching inside my jacket and pulled out a leather-bound folder. Thin, neat, complete. "Thank you for your honesty, Susan," I said, clear enough for everyone to hear. "And now I'll return the favor." I held up the folder. "This is a signed divorce agreement, prepared weeks ago. Included are GPS logs, emails, photographs, and bank statements documenting the affair between my wife and my employee." Gasps, whispers, stunned silence. I handed the folder to my attorney, seated at the front, expression unreadable, but ready. I turned back to Susan. She stepped back just once. Her smile vanished. She said nothing. Then to Kevin, "I once called you my brother. From today on, you're a stranger." Finally, I looked at Brian. "I'm sorry you had to witness this, but know this. I'm not the one being left. I'm the one letting go." I turned to the crowd, the board members, the colleagues, the friends. I didn't lose a wife tonight. I shed a lie. I raised my glass to 20 years and a clean break. I drank, set the glass down, and walked out. No one stopped me. I heard the whispers, the shifting feet, the silence behind me louder than any applause. Susan didn't call after me. Kevin didn't follow. Brian stood where he was, eyes locked on me, silent, steady. I stepped into the elevator alone. In the reflection, I saw a 51-year-old man, graying hair, tired eyes, but a straight back. I didn't see a broken man. I saw a survivor, stepping out of the wreckage, still breathing. I didn't lose anything tonight. I just walked away from what never deserved me. I don't remember how I got to the parking garage. I don't remember whether I drove myself home or someone else did. All I remember is standing alone in my home office, the window wide open, Boston's October air pouring in, sharp, cold, but not colder than the silence inside my chest. The room was quiet, only the sound of the wall clock ticking, each beat counting down the years I'd spent giving myself to someone who no longer deserved it. I loosened my tie, unbuttoned the top of my shirt, but the pressure in my throat didn't ease, not because I was heartbroken, but because I had known for a long time, and still, I'd waited with the kind of calm that only comes when you've already stopped hoping. I didn't fall apart that night, but I was tired, the kind of tired that comes after a long, bloodless war you were too proud to admit was happening. The door creaked open behind me. Brian stood in the doorway, no knock, no hesitation. "I tracked your car," he said. I didn't turn around. My hand rested on the back of my leather chair, eyes fixed on the night beyond the glass. "I'm sorry you had to see that," I said. A pause, then his voice, low, firm. "You don't need to apologize. You weren't the one who did anything wrong." That sentence, short, quiet, sliced through the fog around my heart like a clean blade. I turned to face him. His eyes were steady, cold, but burning underneath. "When did you figure it out?" I asked. 6 months ago. I wasn't sure at first. Then I saw how Mom texted non-stop, how she disappeared without saying where she was going, and—" he paused, "how Kevin looked at her. He said the name like it was poison." I nodded. I wasn't surprised. My son had grown up faster than I realized, and he'd become exactly the kind of man I needed beside me. That night we sat in silence in the living room, tea in hand. No TV, no distractions. Brian broke the quiet with one question. "You planned this, didn't you?" I smiled, the first time in weeks. "One day you'll understand. In both business and marriage, the ones who survive aren't always the strongest. They're the ones who prepare best." The next morning, I got a text from David Lindstrom, an old friend from college, now a senior divorce and asset attorney at one of the most respected firms in the city. "I heard what happened. If you need me, I'm in." I replied with a single word, need. That afternoon, 2 of my partners reached out. One said bluntly, "If you want an internal investigation team, I can hook you up. I trust you." The other was more reserved. I didn't believe the rumors about Kevin. Now I regret that. I didn't need their sympathy. I just needed to know they weren't turning away. And they weren't. That night, I sat alone in my office on the 25th floor, Sterling and Rowe headquarters. Looking out at the glowing city, I began to lay out the first steps of a strategy I'd been quietly building for 6 months. I wasn't a victim. I was the man who walked into the battlefield already armored. My suspicion didn't start with something obvious. It started with how everything suddenly felt too smooth. Susan changed her habits. She started using a second phone. "For work," she said. Her schedule became oddly packed. Catching up with old friends became a routine, and her eyes, they no longer stayed with me when she spoke. They looked somewhere else. At someone else. I didn't accuse her, didn't ask questions, didn't snoop through her phone. I just watched. I noted what time she left the house, when she got back. I paid attention to the Uber license plates she took, then created a separate account to trace her ride history. One night she left her iPad in the living room. I didn't touch it, but I saw a message flash on the lock screen. "It's fine. I don't want anyone seeing us in the level B garage, either." From Kevin. Still, I said nothing. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was a quiet, cold vacuum. Then logic took over. I installed a message recovery program, hired a digital forensics expert, a former NSA systems engineer, to dig into her cloud accounts. We tracked down every financial transaction tied to the Family Investment Trust, which Susan used to access freely. The findings: 3 transfers, all under $10,000, to an LLC registered under Kevin's name, a shell company. Next, I set up GPS tracking on her car. I didn't do it because I needed to know where she was. I did it to confirm what I already knew. At least 3 times a week, her car stopped at the same apartment building in South End, a high-rise that rents by the month. I didn't hand over the evidence right away. I kept gathering. I'd learned this from business. When someone plays dirty, let them think they're winning. Let them show every card, then move. I had our corporate legal team review Kevin's employee agreement, focusing on ethics and conflict of interest clauses. They found that Kevin had used his company email to send Susan files labeled personal, and on one occasion forwarded early-stage investment data before public disclosure. That alone was grounds for immediate termination. But I didn't pull the trigger yet. I stored all the evidence on an encrypted USB drive, locked in my personal safe, backed it up on an offline hard drive, sent a second copy to David, my lawyer, just in case. I didn't lose sleep. I still went to work, still smiled, still played golf every Sunday like nothing was wrong, but beneath the surface I was mapping out a war plan. I wasn't a victim. I was a man who had woken up at the right moment. I met with David Lindstrom on Monday morning at 8:15 in his top-floor office overlooking the Charles River. We went to Harvard together, same year, same major. I chose the markets. He chose the courtroom. Now, David is one of the most respected divorce and asset attorneys on the East Coast, and the only person I trusted enough to handle this properly. He didn't greet me with small talk or old friend nostalgia. He simply nodded, looked me in the eye, and said, "We're going to treat this like a failed acquisition. No emotions, no sympathy, just objectives." I handed him a USB drive containing the full case file, GPS logs, emails, screenshots, statements, audio files, everything I had. I also brought a hard copy of the prenuptial agreement, our marital asset breakdown, and Kevin's employment contract. David reviewed each item carefully, page by page, his fingers gliding over the paper like a judge reading a criminal indictment. After 13 minutes, he put his pen down. "This is a strong file," he said flatly, "and with this prenup, you don't have to give her a single cent." I nodded. I'd already reviewed that document back when I first suspected something. Clause 9.2, last line. If Party A, the wife, violates the fidelity clause during the marriage, all marital assets are to be treated as individually assigned to Party B. Susan signed it in 2003, a week after our wedding. She'd laughed at the time. "I'm signing this because I know you'll never need it." I believed her. David continued, "With this evidence, we can block any post-divorce support. If you're willing, we could even bring a civil case for financial collusion." "And Kevin?" I asked. David looked at me for 3 quiet seconds, then replied, "He's an employee. His contract includes ethics and data protection clauses, using his company email to send personal files and accessing accounts outside his clearance, grounds for immediate dismissal." We started planning. 1. Asset freeze. David drafted an emergency motion to freeze all joint accounts. We couldn't risk Susan moving or hiding money before the filing was complete. 2. Silence. He advised me to go completely silent for the next 2 weeks. No texts, no calls, no press. "We need them to think you've surrendered," he said. "That's how you get them to play reckless." 3. Internal audit. I quietly notified our chief legal officer, one of the few people I trusted inside the firm. He was tasked with auditing all transactions under Kevin's access from the last 6 months. That afternoon, I returned to the 25th floor of Sterling and Row. I ran meetings, signed deals, had lunch with an investor. No one in the office or the outside world had any idea I was building a legal firewall beneath their feet. This wasn't revenge. This was restoring my position, with the precision of a surgical cut. That evening, I got a text from Susan. "We need to talk. I don't want this to get any worse." I locked my phone, turned off the lights. I didn't reply. Not because I was still angry, but because whatever boundary she thought she could draw no longer mattered. 2 days later, Kevin filed for personal leave. 1 month, no explanation. I approved it in 10 minutes. No meeting, no words, no farewell. A week after that, I authorized a full change in internal access rights, especially around sensitive fund strategy documents. No one asked questions. I kept showing up. I worked. I played golf on Saturdays. Ate lunch at 12:30 sharp. But one thing had changed. I no longer wore my wedding ring. Suffolk County Court, Boston. A crisp fall morning. No reporters, no spectacle. No one outside courtroom 12 would know that a 20-year marriage was about to be dissolved with a single signature and a judge's voice. I arrived 20 minutes early. Dark gray suit, deep blue tie, clean shoes. I carried one leather briefcase. Inside, the prenuptial agreement, financial records, and documentation of Susan's relationship with Kevin. Every page clipped, ordered, clean. David was already inside. He didn't speak when I entered, just nodded once and gestured toward the seat beside him. There was nothing to discuss. Everything had been prepared, nothing left to say. Susan arrived 15 minutes later. She still looked composed. Light curls, beige coat, simple dress, heels. She sat 3 seats away, didn't look at me, but I noticed. She no longer carried the same confidence from that night at the party. Kevin followed behind her, navy suit, but his shirt collar was slightly crooked. His steps were uneven. He didn't meet my eyes. I didn't bother meeting his. Presiding over the case was Judge Linda Moore, a 60-something woman with a sharp mind and a reputation for being immune to theatrics. I'd read about her, fair, blunt, and impossible to manipulate. David began the proceedings with his usual precision. "We are not disputing the end of the marriage," he stated. "What we seek is the proper enforcement of the prenuptial agreement, signed and notarized in 2003, which includes clear consequences for breach of fidelity." Then he presented the evidence, not dramatically but methodically. Text messages between Susan and Kevin, GPS data logs, bank transfers, internal emails, proof that Kevin used company email to send Susan sensitive financial data before it was made public. Susan's lawyer, Mr. Carter, attempted to push back. He claimed that Susan had signed the prenup under emotional pressure and that some of the evidence was circumstantial. David responded by submitting 2 key documents. 1, a copy of Susan's undergraduate degree in business law. 2, a notarized record showing she was accompanied by her own legal counsel when she signed the agreement. "She understood what she was signing," David said. "We're not arguing morality. We're enforcing a contract." Judge Moore turned to me. "Mr. Callahan, do you wish to speak?" I stood. No notes. I didn't look at Susan. "Your Honor," I said, "I'm not here to punish anyone. I'm here to end this the right way." I paused. "I've spent 20 years building a company worth hundreds of millions, but I never treated my marriage like a business. Until I was betrayed, I didn't retaliate. I prepared." Silence followed. I didn't need to say more. Everything that mattered was already in the file. Kevin was called for questioning. He tried to keep his composure, but when asked about using internal company email to share files with a major shareholder's spouse, he invoked his right to remain silent. He looked down, said nothing else, and everyone in that room understood what that silence meant. Judge Moore recessed for 45 minutes to review the documents. No one spoke. Susan fidgeted with her ring. Kevin pulled out his phone but quickly stuffed it back into his pocket. David stayed calm. I leaned back, hands folded. When the judge returned, she read her decision slowly, clearly. After reviewing the documentation and the terms of the prenuptial agreement, the court recognizes its full legal validity. The conduct of Party A, Mrs. Susan Callahan, constitutes a breach of marital fidelity and activates the financial consequences described therein. Therefore, Party A shall receive no post-marital support. Assets registered solely in the name of Party B, Mr. Richard Callahan, shall not be subject to division. All frozen joint accounts will be transferred in full to Mr. Callahan within 15 business days. Susan said nothing, but I saw her shoulders tremble. She didn't cry, but her lips lost all color. Kevin left the room the moment the hearing ended. He didn't wait for her, didn't say goodbye, didn't look back. I rose, picked up my briefcase, and walked out like it was just another meeting on a Tuesday. Outside, Boston's autumn wind brushed my face. I inhaled deeply, not with relief, but to confirm something within myself. I had closed a chapter, and I was still whole. Back at the office, I removed my jacket, splashed cold water on my face, and opened my laptop. 3 investment contracts waited. An executive board member was requesting a strategy briefing. HR had emailed a short list of candidates to replace Kevin. I reviewed each item carefully, deliberately. No one brought up the trial. No one had to. I looked down at my left hand. The ring was gone, and I knew in that moment I no longer had to pretend I still loved someone who stopped loving me long ago. I didn't go home right after the trial. Instead, I drove out to the Charlestown Harbor, the same pier where I used to take Brian fishing when he was 8. The wind off the bay came through the open window, brisk and sharp. Boston's early autumn breeze sliced past my collar and into my chest, but it wasn't as cold as what was inside me. I parked by the seawall and stepped out. The sky was a dull steel gray. The water rippled with small waves, calm and steady. I sat on a worn wooden bench near the edge facing the bay. I didn't think, I didn't wait. I just sat and breathed. There was no victory in this, no applause, no champagne, no one waiting at home with warm eyes and open arms. There was only me. And the truth, I had done what I had to do to save myself. I thought I'd feel vindicated, that when Susan was stripped of everything she thought she could keep, when Kevin vanished from the company like a stain scrubbed clean, I'd feel lighter, but I didn't. I just felt empty. Not from grief, not from loss, but from having grown used to sharing a house with a ghost. That night, I returned home. I didn't turn on the lights, didn't play music. I walked through the house like I was seeing it for the first time. The living room too quiet, the bedroom too still, the kitchen too spotless to feel lived in. Susan had left everything. She didn't clean out a single drawer, didn't leave a note. Maybe she never planned to return. I walked into the walk-in closet. Her clothes were still hanging, shoes neatly lined, perfume bottles on the shelf, untouched. But everything smelled cold, lifeless. I brought in cardboard boxes and began packing her things, not quickly, not angrily, just carefully, like I was helping someone leave my life with dignity. The next morning, I called an interior design team. I want to change everything, I said. Paint, layout, lighting, the whole house. The woman on the phone asked, "What kind of style are you going for?" I paused. "Not a specific style," I replied, "just something that doesn't feel like a memory." Brian came home that weekend. He walked through the house without commenting on the changes, then joined me on the balcony. We drank beer in silence, watching the city fade under early evening light. After a while, he asked, "Do you hate her?" I shook my head. "No, she betrayed me, but I'm the one who let it go on in silence." He looked at me. "Are you okay now?" I nodded, not forcing a smile. "I am, because I no longer live inside a lie." He didn't say anything else, but in his eyes, I saw something I hadn't expected. Not sympathy, not concern, pride. I returned to work earlier than I'd planned. In the second week after the trial, I stood in the boardroom on the 26th floor, presenting our Q4 investment strategy to the board. The same walls, same projector, same faces. Only one thing had changed. I no longer wore my wedding ring, and my voice, sharp, clear, unapologetically focused. I started building new routines, morning runs at Esplanade, lunch alone at a small cafe near the public library, evenings with old books I'd abandoned in college when work took over my life. Not to restart my life, just to start living what's left of it, on my terms. I deactivated Facebook, no updates, no cryptic status messages, no courtroom summaries, no fishing for pity. I didn't need sympathy, and I didn't need anyone's pat on the back. Silence, I learned, can be the loudest answer you ever give. I don't hate Susan. I don't hope she suffers. I don't need her to regret anything. The heaviest price she'll ever pay is losing a man like me, and knowing she'll never have someone like me again. It took nearly a month before the house finally felt like mine. Everything had changed. The paint on the walls was lighter, the dining table smaller, the kitchen neater. The wooden knife set Susan loved was gone. The bedroom had been rearranged, minimalist, bright, not a single object out of place. But the biggest change wasn't physical, it was the silence, no longer threatening, the echo of footsteps, no longer lonely. A man, no longer pretending to be a husband. I started writing again, not a book, not a memoir, just short notes in a notebook, a few lines each day, a morning filled with sun, a cup of unsweetened tea, a fleeting look from a stranger on Beacon Street. I didn't write for anyone else. I wrote to remind myself that I was still alive, still feeling, still myself. Brian got into a residency program in New York. Before he left, he came by the house and hugged me tightly. "Thanks for not falling apart," he said. I didn't reply. I just patted his back gently. I hadn't broken, but not because I was strong. I had just grown too tired of pretending. One Saturday afternoon, I stopped by a second-hand bookstore in South End. I bought an old Raymond Carver novel. Spine cracked, pages yellowed. At the counter, the woman behind the register looked up. We locked eyes for 3 seconds. No spark, no flirtation, no instant pull, just a quiet exchange. Two people who had both been through something and no longer expected to be rescued. I nodded. She nodded back. We didn't ask names, didn't exchange numbers. But the next day, I went back. I wasn't looking for a relationship. I was looking for a real conversation. No performance, no pretense. And maybe after years of calculation, I found it in a stranger. We spoke every weekend, not about each other, not about the past. Just little things, a book, an old film, the way rain feels when it hits a quiet street. I don't know what the future holds, and I don't need to. For the first time in years, I've learned to live without depending on someone else to feel worthy. I no longer wait for a message. I no longer need someone to remind me I'm enough. I know that now, every morning when I wake up, every night when I lie down, alone and at peace. If you ask me if I have regrets, yes. I regret staying too long in a marriage where I was no longer loved. I regret how much time I lost trying to hold together something already broken. But I don't regret leaving. I kept one photo from the wedding, not framed, just tucked away in the bottom drawer, not to remember, but to remind myself, once I trusted someone that much, and now I choose to trust myself. One evening, with the first chill of Boston winter drifting through the windows, I stood at the window with a mug of tea in hand, watching the cars move like tiny pulses in the street below, and I whispered something to no one. Not to post online, not for anyone to hear, but for myself. I didn't lose anything. I just found myself again. And for the first time in years, I smiled. Not forced, not bitter, just free.